There is a silent moment in every person's life when they realize something uncomfortable. It's not the lack of talent keeping them where they are. It's not the lack of opportunity. It is something much harder to admit. It is the way they think. When no one is watching, you can work hard, study more, try again. But if your mind remains programmed to survive instead of to win, every effort becomes an exhausting cycle. And the most dangerous part of it all is that on the outside, it looks normal. You wake up. You fulfill your obligations. You pay your bills. You repeat phrases like, "One day it will work out." But on the inside, there is an ache that won't go away. A feeling that you were born for more. But you are living on autopilot. Napoleon Hill discovered something that almost no one wants to hear. The outside world never rises above the level of your internal identity. It's not the market that limits you. It's not the government. It's not your family. It is the mental code that was installed in you without your consent. From a young age, you learn not to want too much, not to dream too high, not to bother anyone. And slowly, that became a pattern. The problem is not that you don't know what you want. The problem is that you have been trained to doubt what you want. If what I am saying causes you discomfort, good. Because that discomfort is the sign that something inside you is still alive. There is still a part of you that refuses to accept a small life. And it is exactly that part that we are going to talk to right now. Not to motivate, not to cheer you up, but to reprogram. Because when the mind changes its frequency, reality is forced to respond. Who do you decide to be from this moment on? If you have chosen the side of transformation, click the link below in the first comment to access your activation prayer. Leave a like right now to seal this commitment to yourself. And subscribe to reprogram your mind with us every single day. Your new self begins right now. There is an uncomfortable truth. Desire is not enough. You can wish for a better life for years and never move an inch. What actually moves you is not a wish. It is your internal image. When that image is weak, the mind hides in excuses and procrastination. Most people fail, not because they lack talent, but because they never redefined who they are. Here is the turning point. When you observe your thoughts with brutal honesty, you realize something unsettling. Most of those thoughts are not yours. They were inherited. They were imposed. They were accepted without question. The question for your future is not, are you capable? The question is, are you willing to dismantle the structure that keeps you small? What follows this decision is not comfortable, but it is real. And once you see the truth, there is no going back. True change begins when you accept that your mind has been operating in defensive mode for years. Not because you are weak, but because it was trained for that. Since you were a child, you learned to protect yourself from mistakes, from judgment, from rejection, and without realizing it, that protection became an invisible limit. Every time an idea emerged that was bigger than usual, an internal voice appeared, disguised as caution. It's not the right time. Be realistic. Don't overdo it. That voice was not born with you. It was installed. And as long as you keep obeying it, your life will move within a safe perimeter, but a very narrow one. Napoleon Hill understood that most people do not fail because of a lack of intelligence, but because of a lack of internal direction. A mind without a clear goal gets scattered. It gets tired. It gets confused. That is why so many people live busy lives, but never move forward. They move a lot, but always in circles. The problem is not the effort. It is the absence of a dominant image to organize that effort. When you don't consciously decide where you are going, your subconscious chooses for you. And it almost always chooses the familiar, not the extraordinary. Here, something decisive happens. The moment you clearly define what you want and why you want it, your mind begins to behave differently. It begins to filter reality. Opportunities that previously went unnoticed start to stand out. People, ideas, paths, everything seems to align. Not because the world has changed, but because you changed your focus. The human mind works like a radar. It only detects what it was programmed for. If it was programmed to survive, it will ignore everything involving growth. If it was programmed to triumph, it will start looking for signs of progress, even in the middle of chaos. But here is the part that few accept. That reprogramming requires total responsibility. You cannot keep blaming circumstances while trying to build something great. The moment you assume that your current results reflect, at some level, your past decisions, you regain your power. It may hurt. It may be uncomfortable, but it is liberating. Because if your decisions brought you here, new decisions can take you somewhere else. The subconscious does not distinguish between what is real and what is imagined with emotion. This is one of the most powerful keys Hill revealed. When you repeat an idea charged with feeling, your mind accepts it as an instruction. And once accepted, it begins to influence your daily behavior. Your habits change. Your reactions change. Your tolerance for mediocrity dies. None of this happens overnight. The mind is not reprogrammed with momentary enthusiasm, but with conscious repetition. Every thought held with emotion is an instruction. Every word you repeat about yourself reinforces an identity. That is why you must be relentless with what you accept as internal truth. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every doubt deserves to be heard. As this process moves forward, something subtle begins to change. Your decisions become firmer. Your tolerance for distraction decreases. You start to feel discomfort when you waste time on things that don't bring you closer to your vision. Not because you become rigid, but because your mind now has a clear direction. And a mind with direction no longer negotiates with mediocrity. But here comes the point that defines if this remains as understanding or becomes real transformation. No mind strengthens in isolation. The environment influences you more than you imagine. The voices you listen to, the conversations you tolerate, the people you spend time with, all of that feeds or weakens the program you are installing. The next step doesn't just depend on what you think, but on who you think with. And when you understand how that choice can accelerate or destroy your entire internal process, you will never look at your relationships the same way again. When you change internally, the world around you begins to feel uncomfortable. Not because you are wrong, but because you no longer fit into the same molds. Some people will stay close, as long as you don't transform too much. Others will distance themselves in silence, once they perceive that you no longer validate the same complaints, the same fears, the same excuses. That distancing is not a loss. It is a signal. Authentic growth always alters the environment. This is why those who try to evolve without adjusting their relationships usually feel exhausted. It isn't the effort that tires you. It is the inconsistency. Trying to move forward with a new mind, while surrounded by old conversations, creates a constant internal conflict. Sooner or later, something has to give. Napoleon Hill understood that no mind reaches its maximum potential in prolonged isolation. The right exchange does not just bring knowledge. It corrects internal distortions. A mind alone easily convinces itself that it is doing enough. A mind in contact with others, more demanding minds, discovers how much it can still expand. It is not about competition. It is about raising the standard. But choosing a higher environment has a price. It demands giving up the comfort of being understood by everyone. It demands accepting that not everyone will celebrate your change. And this is one of the most important filters of growth. Learning to walk without applause. Most people retreat here, not because of inability, but because of the fear of disapproval. There is an inevitable period of adjustment. A space where you are no longer who you were. but you don't yet feel like who you are becoming. That space may feel like loneliness, but in reality, it is incubation. That is where your judgment strengthens, where your internal voice stops seeking external validation and begins to lead with firmness. When you cross this point, something stabilizes. Your decisions become clearer. Your energy stops being scattered. You start saying no without guilt, and yes with intention. You no longer chase acceptance. You choose consistency. And that consistency, silently, begins to build respect. However, this is not the end of the process. Maintaining a new mindset when everything is going well is easy. The real challenge appears when things don't go as expected, when effort does not bring immediate results, when doubt returns, disguised as logic. It is in that scenario where what you have truly built is put to the test. Because the next stage is not about thinking differently. It is about persisting, even when the emotion is no longer there to sustain the progress. There comes a point on the journey where motivation is no longer enough. At the start, excitement pushes you. The idea is thrilling. The vision seems clear. But over time, that initial energy fades, and all that remains is the internal structure you built. This is where most people stop. Not because they don't want to move forward, but because they never developed the capacity to sustain the process. When the reward is not immediate, persistence is not blind effort. It is the ability to continue with clarity, even when the mind begins to question everything. Napoleon Hill spoke of temporary failure as a signal, not a verdict. Every obstacle reveals information. Every incomplete result points to a necessary adjustment. But those who interpret difficulty as a confirmation of their inability, they quit just when the learning is about to solidify. Here, a silent enemy appears. Rationalized procrastination. It doesn't look like laziness. It looks like caution. I'll do it better tomorrow. I need more information. The timing isn't right. These phrases sound sensible, but they hide fear. Fear of exposure. Fear of failing publicly. Fear of discovering how far you are actually capable of going. The difference between those who progress and those who stagnate is not the absence of doubt. It is their relationship with it. People who build lasting results do not wait to feel secure before they act. They act. And in the process, they develop security. Confidence does not precede action. It is a consequence of sustaining it. Despite the uncertainty, there is a specific point where most people give up. It's not when everything goes wrong. It's when nothing seems to move. That neutral territory, without big failures or big victories, is the most dangerous place of all. There, the mind gets bored. It loses focus. It starts looking for distractions. This is why discipline becomes crucial. Not as a punishment, but as an anchor. A minimal, sustained routine keeps the mind from scattering when the emotion is no longer there to drive it. Emotional transmutation happens when you stop fighting what you feel and start using it. Frustration can become clarity. Anxiety can become focus. Even fear can act as a compass. Generally, what you avoid the most is what can expand you the most. Not because it's easy, but because it demands a more integral version of you. As you cross these moments, something changes in your identity. You no longer define yourself by immediate results, but by your capacity to sustain a commitment. But this stage brings one final test. When you start to strengthen internally, life raises the level of the challenge. Not to punish you, but to verify if your new structure can withstand real pressure. Unexpected situations appear. The environment tests your limits once again. And at that point, it is no longer enough to understand the principles. You must embody them. Because there is a profound difference between knowing what to do and doing it when it costs you. The next level is not reached with more information, but with a firm decision to act in alignment with your vision, even when the world seems to go against you. A decisive moment arrives when you can no longer pretend that you don't know. After everything you have understood, returning to old patterns becomes uncomfortable. Not because someone is watching you, but because your own conscience will no longer allow it. This is where many people stop, not due to a lack of ability, but because moving forward demands absolute coherence between what you think, what you say, and what you do. Real mental reprogramming is not proven in moments of clarity. It is proven in moments of pressure. When exhaustion sets in, when results are delayed, when no one validates your effort. That is where your true identity is revealed. A reprogrammed mind does not act only when it is easy. It acts because not doing so is no longer an option. Napoleon Hill taught that character is formed in silent persistence, not in the applause, not in external recognition, but in invisible consistency. In this territory, you abandon the need for constant motivation. You enter a more mature stage. Internal commitment. You no longer ask yourself if you feel like it. You ask yourself if it is consistent with the person you decided to be. Here, a subtle but profound shift occurs. You stop measuring your progress only by visible results. And you start observing your discipline, your focus, and your ability to sustain decisions. You understand that every small, aligned action reinforces a strong identity, while every concession weakens the system you are building. You also learn to live with discomfort, without interpreting it as a sign of error. Authentic growth rarely feels comfortable. It feels demanding. It feels challenging. But it also feels true. Unlike stagnant comfort, which slowly numbs you, the discomfort of progress wakes you up. It keeps you present. It forces you to participate actively in your own life. At this stage, the external world may not change immediately. Circumstances may take time to reflect your internal transformation. And that delay is one final test. A test of practical faith. Not blind faith, but confidence built on conscious repetition. You keep acting in alignment, not because you see results yet, but because you understand that cause always precedes effect. And then, something solidifies. Your identity no longer depends on external validation. Your self-esteem no longer fluctuates with every result. You become more stable, clearer, firmer. Not because everything is easy, but because you no longer betray yourself to avoid effort. And that internal loyalty creates a force that does not need to be proven. From this moment on, the question is no longer whether you are capable of building something great. The question is, how much are you willing to sustain that greatness over time?